I would assume it's more like a normalization of relationships. By normalization, we mean people being able to travel back and forth to Israel and Bahrain. And also by normalization is people having the opportunities to perhaps have bank accounts in reciprocal countries and to be able to conduct any investments that they might want to do there. Jewish community came to Bahrain in roughly the last years of the 19th century. In the first known case of Jews coming from Iraq was Mr. Salah Yadgar. And he came over in roughly the 1860s or the 1870s. Now, what happened in Bahrain at that time was that Bahrain was really a trading post between Europe and India. And it was a very important trading post because the goods used to come through Bahrain. Now, it was well known also that Bahrain had work available. So whether it was menial labor, whether it was kind of like labor-oriented work that was available, the Iraqi Jews, who were kind of like misfits in their own country and who weren't comfortable living in Iraq, they're the ones who first started coming to Bahrain to find alternative employment. And I'll give you the example of my grandfather. He, as a young boy, his mother passed away. So he was, his father remarried, and he was extremely unhappy with the new family. So he actually wanted to get away from his family. So his uncle decided to take him and bring him to Bahrain and to find a new life. And that's basically what he did. And he started off as a baker, of all things, you know. And from that, he developed into being someone who was taking the strips out of the silver threads out of discarded clothing. And he used to take the silver threads, gather them all up, and with an acidic process, started making silver bars out of them. Wow. And with those silver bars, he started dealing with people like Johnson Matthey. Johnson Matthey, of course, was a huge name in metals. And that's how he started the money exchange business. He actually developed from that into a money exchange business. So it was an amazing route for him to go down. Now, that's only my grandfather. The other Jews that came along, they were all into textiles. And the advantage they had is that they knew how to communicate with parties outside Bahrain. So they would be able to sort of write letters to textile suppliers and say to them, hey, we're Jewish people, by the way, and we know you're Jewish, and you know, could you send us a container load of material that we can sell and then pay you afterwards? And they were doing that. So they ended up, like Mr. Joseph Kaduri, they ended up making an absolute fortune from the idea that they could bring in as many containers as they like and pay for them later. And Joseph Kaduri became one of the wealthiest Bahrainis due to that ability that he had. Of course, the other Jews all got involved in things like electronics, textiles, and exchanging money, and that's how they ended up making their mini fortunes. They weren't overly wealthy, but their mini fortunes. So in the 20s and 30s, there was a group of about 800 Jews, all working in Manama, and Manama was the trading center of Bahrain. But they were like a rabble. They didn't know much about their religion. They didn't know much about reading Hebrew. You know, and it's only when Mr. Cartier came along, the pearl trader, he used to come along to Bahrain regularly to buy pearls from the pearl traders here. And we have a lovely picture of him with all the pearl traders. And he saw that there was a rabble here, and he decided to build for them a synagogue and bring in a rabbi to teach them how to pray and to teach them how to read Hebrew. And he did just that. So he was an amazing character. But of course, when we went to actually try and verify that it was Mr. Cartier who did this, they had no recollection over there in the Cartier offices in Switzerland and France. And they had no recollection. But of course, if you're making a mitzvah you're not going to tell anybody what you're doing. So he actually did a mitzvah for the Jewish community.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
from that, we go to 1948. In 1948, of course, we got the Palestine issue. After that, we know that it was a group of foreign Arab migrant workers who were working in the ports, who were the ones who started attacking Jewish homes. And we've got that account from, more than anywhere, Charles Belgrave. He accounted that. He actually wrote all that. So they ransacked the synagogue, and it was at that time that they decided to leave Bahrain. So we had the first group of Jews leaving Bahrain in 48, and 10 to 15 years later, a second group decided to leave as well, because the community became small, and for anyone who had daughters, they would have had difficulty trying to find husbands for them. So they made the decision that it's better to go than to stay. And what remained was a group of about 70 or 80 Jewish people who had Bahraini passports, and they decided to take the chance and stay. And of course, that's all the families that exist today.
What's the number today? How large is the Jewish community in Bahrain today?
It's a very good question, and many people say, how come you say like 60, 70, or sometimes it's 40, 30? Well, it's all seasonal, because the Jews, they all have second homes everywhere else. So at any one time, I cannot tell you how many Jews there are in Bahrain, but I can tell you it's roughly 50. We can only say that when we heard the news about the UAE, we were stunned. We really were. And at that time, we figured out, well, maybe Bahrain is next. So we had an inkling at that time that Bahrain was going to come along. Or we didn't know whether Saudi was going to come along, whether Oman was going to come along. But it became a real surprise for us, and a great surprise. We were all very thrilled about it. At the moment, no, but there is probably a roadmap that they're going to be working on, trying to put together, the next steps. And I'm sure it's going to happen. It's going to take a bit of time to happen, but I'm sure they're working on it straight away. The good news is that I've got so many calls from Israel about people who want to come over. Of course, don't forget the children of the families that left in the 50s. They probably would love to come back here to look and see where their parents lived, because some of the houses are still around in Manama where their parents used to live. And we have a cemetery, and in that cemetery there are their relatives who are buried there. So it could be that they want to visit their relatives as well in the cemetery. So I've had a lot of calls from the people who have a connection with Bahrain, who would love to come back here as soon as they can.
And is there any indication as to when air links will be restored, or will actually be implemented between the two countries?
I'm sure that's going to happen very, very fast. I think they've got a lockdown at the moment in Israel, so I would imagine they're out of action for a while. But definitely, I would imagine El Al will be coming here, and I would imagine Gulf Air will be going to Israel. Agriculture, definitely, hydroponics, and they have very good fish farming, so they will benefit. And the other sector is AI. AI in the sense that they've got robotic systems that do window cleaning for buildings. They've got robotic systems that do other things, and I'm sure that's a good sector to come and work on in Bahrain. Whatever the powers that be that decide these timings and whatever, I know that our king has the most wonderful, empathic view of life. And he really is somebody who wants to find ways to open up, peaceful coexistence. And that's an honorable kind of target that he has. So I'm so happy with the way in which he's taken this really bold step. If it wasn't going to happen now, it was going to happen at some stage, I'm sure. Because there's no movement in opposing views unless somebody is willing to say, okay, okay, we'll give in a bit more, and we'll allow something that will open up ideas. And this is exactly what he's done. He's allowed this deal to open up ideas of how the Palestinian issue could be resolved, and how give and take could happen between them. People have to give and take, and I honestly see, I mean, the idea that we have so many religions, so many cultures living here in a very small area, it's a surprise. It's a surprise to a lot of people. And I think there are two things that are important in this. One is that we all have two types of mentalities. We have the public mentality and we have our private mentality. Now, you and your private mentality can think what you like, whatever ideology you have in it, whatever ideas you have in your private life or in your private mind, well, that's up to you. Nobody's going to tell you anything. On the public level, you have to respect other people's existence, other people's decisions, other people's, you have to be polite to exist in the public level. And I think that public mentality has been shown to work on the basis that we expect you to be, we expect you to allow coexistence with everybody else. So it's no good for one group telling us, oh, you know, we're totally opposed to you for this and all that. Well, we're on a public level as well. So we deserve to have that same kind of coexistence. I would imagine the long-term benefits is the Israelis are, when they get to grips with being able to sort of focus on investment in a country, then they will allow Bahrain to benefit from anything new that's coming out in Israel and from their research. And I would assume, just like in the solar technology field, I would imagine that they will be able to give us, before giving anybody else, the ability to either set up laboratories here or to set up a way in which the Bahrainis can benefit. In other words, more like a training center for Bahrainis. And the one thing we're all looking forward to is at least some jobs for the Bahrainis that will be decent, good jobs that reflect what they've been studying for.